And joining us now, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker. So, Peter, you've been writing about Trump's speeches, maybe perhaps showing signs of age. I'll read from it. You point out, quote, this: he rambles, he repeats himself, he roams from thought to thought, some of them hard to understand, some of them unfinished, some of them factually fantastical. He voices outlandish claims that seem to be made up out of whole cloth. He digresses into bizarre tangents about golf, about sharks, about his own, quote, beautiful body. He relishes a great day in Louisiana after spending the day in Georgia. He expresses fear that North Korea is trying to kill me, when he presumably means Iran. As late as last month, Mr. Trump was still speaking as if he were running against President Biden 5 weeks after his withdrawal from the race.
And we have World War, of course, him talking about World War II, him continually saying that he beat Barack Obama and confusing Barack Obama and Joe Biden. And the list does go on.
But now dangerous, whether it's age or something more nefarious. He's talking about saying the Democrats were trying to kill him.
Right. And so, again, everything does seem to be amped up and more unhinged. But here's the question, Peter. We've been talking about this for quite some time, that Donald Trump has broken all norms of political rhetoric. I've been talking about Charles Krauthammer and how radically different Donald Trump is from Charles Krauthammer, how radically different he is from the 240 years of conservatism before he came on the scene. So I'm curious, because even in 2017, Charles Krauthammer was saying that Donald Trump was basically unhinged and acting like an 11-year-old. So you've looked at the speeches. Sorry for the long windup, but it's important so people don't say, oh, Peter's just saying the same thing that they've all been saying for years. You've looked at the speeches through the years. Do you actually see him regressing? Do you see a difference between the danger and just the maniacal rantings today and what we may have seen in 2017, 2018, 2020?
Yeah, no, Joe, I mean, you're right to say that it's not new that Donald Trump is a discursive speaker, let's say, that he rambles, that he says things that are outrageous, that he says things that are untrue, that he seems to at times be disconnected from the norms and the standards that we're used to. You're absolutely right about that. And so there is this debate. OK, so then does that mean he's really getting older or not? So we did go back and look at all of the rallies, not all the rallies. We did an analysis of all the rallies going back to 2015. I looked at many of them, not all of them, but an awful lot of them. And we do see some changes, yes. More accentuation of the negative, more accentuation of all or nothing wording, like never, like always. More, use of swear words. Here's a funny statistic. He uses swear words 69% of the time more than he did in 2016. That's something that could be what experts call disinhibition, right? You lose your inhibitions as you get older. That's a possibility here. We see the speeches getting longer, more rambling in that sense. They're nearly twice as long today as they were in 2016. At the same time, he's doing far fewer of them, right? Does that mean he's tired? We don't know. Obviously, we remember he nodded off during his hush money trial. He's doing like less than 1/4 of the rallies so far this year than he did in 2016. So I think it's appropriate to look at age. Obviously, he doesn't have the same issues that President Biden has. President Biden presented very, old physically, right? He looked frail. He was having a hard time on that debate stage. We all remember that. Trump has different issues. He obviously still exudes energy. And he obviously is loud and bombastic. That hasn't changed. But if you watch the speech patterns, if you spend a little time watching these rallies and compare them to the past, you can see some differences.
Peter, it's such an important work, and you and I have had conversations many times about why Joe Biden drew so much attention for his age and for his verbal missteps, shall we say, and Donald Trump seemed to avoid that. I think you correctly note that part of it is because Trump just projects his at such volume. It's easy just to assume that he's, more with it. But let's talk a little more about some of the rhetoric itself in terms of the call we were talking about this morning, these calls for violence, these claims, dangerous claims about hurricane responses, or even, as we heard over the weekend, this idea with no evidence whatsoever that Democrats were behind or inspired the assassination attempt against him. This is something, the impact of this, I feel like, really can't be overstated.
No, absolutely. There's no filter here, right? It used to be that politicians knew they had to be careful in what they said, at least to some extent, because if they went too far, there would be a price to pay, right? That there would be a blowback. And there doesn't seem to be that in the case of Donald Trump. Now, why is that? It's a good question. I mean, in the end, a lot of Democrats turned their eyes away from Biden's problems for an awful long time until they had to confront it because of his debate performance. And then they decided, no, it's not tenable. We can't have a candidate for president who's going to be 82 he's already 81. He will be 86 at the end of his second term. We decided to do something about it. Republicans have not had that moment with Trump. They have not decided this is a problem, that they need to replace him on the ballot. That's not likely to happen. There doesn't seem to be any chance of that at this point. So part of it is that the Democrats decided to deal with their aging candidate, and the Republicans decided that they're perfectly happy with their aging candidate. And also part of that is because there's so many other issues with Trump that we tend to follow, right? His criminal issues. He's been convicted of 34 felonies. The threats to not recognize the election. There's so many issues that are involved when you talk about Trump's candidacy that his age doesn't often get to the top of the list necessarily. But it has been the concern of voters for a long time. About 51% or so of voters have said that they think that Trump is too old. They're concerned about his age. He is 78, just 3 years younger than Biden. He would be 82 at the end of his second term.